Hello, and welcome to my paper slide video on the Transcontinental Railroad. I hope you enjoy it. Our story begins in the 1800s in the United States. Back then, our country was a very different place. America was a brand new country. It was also a rapidly growing country, as people would both move from other countries to this country, and then people would move from the east part of the United States more towards the west. Americans also began to take advantage of a brand new invention that would change the course of our history: the steam engine. The steam engine made its first U.S. appearance in the 1830s, and it wasn't long until people began cooking up the idea of a railroad route that ran all the way from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast. You see, in the early 1800s, travel was very slow. If you wanted to get from somewhere back east to, say, the small town of San Francisco, you'd either have to cross the whole country to get there on one of the trails shown in the photo, or you'd have to sail south all the way past the very bottom of South America, and then north all the way back up to San Francisco. Either way, by boat or by wagon, this journey would take 3 to 6 months to get there. A transcontinental railroad was the solution. Finally, in 1861, Congress did something about it. Congress passed a bill that would allow for the creation of a transcontinental railroad. It was decided that one railroad would start in Omaha, Nebraska, and head west, and the other railroad would start in Sacramento, California, and head east, and then they would meet somewhere up in the middle. These two distinct companies had their own name. The one that started in Omaha was named the Union Pacific. They were headed west. And the one that started in California was the Central Pacific, and they were headed east. Initially, however, the Civil War sets the railroad building back, so it was several years before they were able to finally start building. But once the Civil War was finished, building was able to begin in earnest. First, we'll talk about the Union Pacific. Many historians agree that the Union Pacific had the easier route. They were able to cross many of the rolling plains of the United States Midwest, and they had a lot of flat territory to cross. The Central Pacific, however, had a much harder road. They had to cross the rugged Sierra Nevada mountains, as you see in the pictures. These are very tall, very steep mountains, lots of rock. They would have to chisel this out either by hand or with dynamite to be able to cross the Sierra Nevada mountains. The weather was also a concern, that in the winter these mountains get lots and lots, many feet of snow. So they came up with the solution to build snow sheds to help from avalanches covering the track all the time. Initially, at one point in the mid-1800s, there was over 30 miles of snow sheds on this route through the Sierra Nevada mountains. Even today, if you drive up through Truckee, up in that area, you can still see some snow sheds that are on the same route that the Central Pacific took, albeit they are modern snow sheds. So in 1869, the railroads were rapidly approaching each other. The Union Pacific had to cross down through Echo Canyon once they entered into the Utah Territory, and once the Central Pacific punched through the Sierra Nevada mountains, they had to cross the Great Basin, which was pretty flat and smooth, so it was a lot easier going for them. So in 1869, both railroads are inside the territory of Utah. Railroad officials from each of these companies met together, and they were able to finally figure out a place where they wanted to join the rails. The place they agreed on was Promontory Summit, and the date they chose was May 10th, 1869. They call this the wedding of the rails because you had the railroad from the east, the Union Pacific, and the railroad from the west, the Central Pacific, joining together to create one rail transportation route that was able to take you all the way from anywhere on the eastern side of the United States to the west. So on May 10th, 1869, these two railroads joined, and this is one of the most famous photos of that day where these two railroads were joined. You had the number 119 from the Central Pacific and the Jupiter from the Union Pacific that were the trains there for the occasion. A golden spike was hammered into the ground for the occasion, and instantly travel was cut down from 3 to 6 months to less than a week. There were some other positive outcomes of finishing the Transcontinental Railroad. One of them is the creation of the Transcontinental Telegraph Line. Now, many of you have heard of the Pony Express that ran in the late 1850s and early 1860s. The Pony Express was able to get mail from one side of the country to the other in about a week, or a little bit over a week. A transcontinental telegraph line, when that was finished, however, made the Pony Express obsolete, because now the telegraph line could easily send information from the west coast to the east coast at the speed of light, which made it instantaneous. Now, the Transcontinental Telegraph line was actually finished a few years before the Transcontinental Railroad, but it's still a positive outcome because the bill that allowed to create the railroad allowed to create the telegraph. So now in 2016, the place where Promontory Summit, where the Golden Spike was driven, is now a National Historical Monument. So you can go visit the Golden Spike Historical Monument. It's only about an hour from where we are here in Richmond. And on May 10th every year, they do a reenactment. You can also go during other times of the year to go view reenactments. And that Golden Spike that was driven into the ground, the Golden Spike is at a museum in Sacramento, California. Thank you for watching my video on the Golden Spike, and I hope you enjoyed it.